I think the most critical skill gap that we're facing is twofold. I think number one, we have to move away from linear skills, like a linear skill, like I'm one dimensional. I can only do this one thing. We have to move into, hey, I am skilled to do multiple things. Because when you think about why corporations have went offshore for talent, it's not just about call centers. They're not going to Asia to say, hey, we need 100 people in the call center. If you think about the talent in the workforce, they are multi-skilled at different things. And so I think that business model is now hitting American shores to where we have to be multi-skilled because of technology and AI.
Welcome to Podcast Wise, Perspectives, Business and Tech. In this episode of Podcast Wise, Alexander Austin is a transformative leader at the intersection of economic policy, business advocacy, and regional innovation. As the president and CEO of the Prince George's County Chamber of Commerce, he oversees one of the largest and most influential business organizations in the Washington metropolitan area. With a career rooted in workforce development and strategic growth, Alexander has become a leading voice for middle market enterprises, the critical companies that bridge the gap between small businesses and global corporations. His leadership is defined by a, quote, vibrant and aggressive approach to regional competitiveness, advocating for the integration of AI, quantum computing, and high-tech infrastructure to position his constituency within the global economy. Alexander is not just a chamber president. He is a visionary architect of the future city, working to ensure that the intersection of technology and community creates a sustainable, high-growth ecosystem for the next generation of entrepreneurs. Let's get started. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Hey, Alex, how are you?
Then I'm doing well. It's glad to be here, and thank you for inviting me on the podcast.
Of course. So let's jump right in. So, Alex, you sit at the center of a very complex web of stakeholders. If you had
I like
to if you had to describe the current vibe of the Prince George's County business community in just one word, one that would surprise an outside investor, what would it be and why?
vibrant.
Vibrant? Okay.
Reason being is new energy. We have new leadership.
Okay.
And with change comes new focus around ensuring that there are quick wins, particularly in filling gaps where the business community may have felt in the past that there was some neglect or there wasn't some alignment. I think the business community has always been vibrant, though, in Prince George's County. It's just from what lens are you looking at it, and then what message are we sending externally? And I
Okay.
think the external message is what is now becoming more of a focus to let investors know, Prince George's County, we've always had the resources. We've always had the talent. We just now have to be aggressive to let the world know that it's here, and
Mhm.
also practice more sustainability around new verticals, focusing on not just contracting, right? Because government was a primary driver. And now that the government is reshaping its business model, it's actually forcing the business community who was supporting the government to reshape how we think about business here in Prince George's County.
Okay, nice. So, as a president, what is the single greatest competitive advantage the county offers to high tech and AI firms that the broader market is currently overlooking?
So, I'm glad you brought that question up. There isn't one single thing. I've
Mhm.
traveled all over the country, and I've talked to economic development leaders in almost every state. I convene with them 3 times a year. And one thing I can tell you about Prince George's County, if you were to name 10 things that a system would need for success, Prince George's County has 7 out of 10 by default.
Wow. Okay, and what would that be?
So, number one, highly educated population, very diverse community, 458 square miles of real estate. Much of it is still undeveloped.
Okay.
Major highway transportation system. To get to DC, to get to the Western, to Virginia, to go west or east, you got to go through Maryland. And if you're coming from the South, you got to go to Prince George's County. If you want to get to the Eastern Shore, you want to get to New York or go north, you got to go to Prince George's County. Major train system with the station in New Carrollton, which is going on a major development right now. We have dynamic leadership. We have 4 colleges and institutions, one of the oldest historic institutions of Bowie State in Maryland. is in Prince
Mhm.
George's County. You got University of Maryland, which is now being reclassified as one of the top Ivy League schools around
Nice.
technology. Yeah, I'm still going, but I said 7, but I'm still going, right?
Yeah, you're still
Yeah,
going.
like the capital of quantum. So you have the development of IonQ and some of the quantum labs that are here. I don't want to ignore, though, Capital Technology University, which is a private institution that is focused just on technology. That
Okay.
we do not also we don't also give enough attention to. But I want to recognize Prince George Community College as another focal institution that is focused on technology with the new advancement of they have a new building and initiative around advanced technicians that are being built. We can also look at the government installations. I mean, there's still 15 government agencies in Prince George's County right now. That includes a major one, which is Andrews Air Force Base, Joint Base Andrews, which provides a lot of information on defense and technology focus areas. So, I mean, it's here. And the last thing I would say is we have 946,000 people in this county.
Ooh,
So
that's a
there's a
lot of
lot.
people.
Yeah, I mean, centrally located to DC, we have a major attraction at the National Harbor, which sits on the water. There's a lot that we have to offer.
Yeah, I totally agree because like I also live in Prince George's County, so it's the diversity. That's one thing that I appreciate the most is the diversity of
Yes.
the population and how even if you were to go to, let's say, another area, because I'm more on the south side, but
Mhm.
if I were to go more north, it's a different vibe, right? Like it's not the same from the south to the north. You can see a difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'll say that too. When we talk about diversity, it's not so much black and white or man and woman, it's global. There
Yeah.
are a handful of ethnicities that are in Prince George's County from all over the world. And some populations, are under the radar, right? We don't necessarily highlight them as much,
Hmm.
but we have literally segments of the population that are strong from all over the globe in Prince George's County. And you can go in different parts of the county to tell and can tell. The other thing I would say around that is what's very unique about Prince George's County is its leadership. So past 2 administrations have been led by women of color. Prince George's County is 53%, the population demographics, 53% women,
Wow.
right? And it's only one of the few areas in the country, even including Atlanta, where you have diverse leadership at every level. No one else can really say that.
Ooh, ooh.
So there's a lot. I mean, the list goes on and on. And here's the other thing I would say that we haven't capitalized on is the amount of private wealth and capital that is here
Hmm.
that has not necessarily been organized in the right way,
Yeah, I agree. And
right?
I think also I'm not sure if the data is still correct because this data was a few years old, where I think the top Black communities, richest communities are in Prince George's County. So I think there was like
And
maybe 3 or 4 of them. So
yeah,
I was
put
really impressed.
in this, yeah. Well, so when you think about, I would say, I think that data has changed a little bit. We talk about nationally. Nationally, some of the top communities for Black wealth are on the Eastern Seaboard. Prince George's County, I think, is like number 11 or 12 now out of top 10. But part of that is, I don't think that we are talking just W-2 statistics, right? So the alleged narrative that Charles County became the richest Black county, and we're talking just from African American perspective, the richest Black county is based on the migration of federal workers that moved to Charles County.
Yeah.
We are not talking about the amount of business owners who have not reported their wealth in Prince George's County, right? Like
Yeah, yeah.
there's a number, and so that's why I say organized, because where that data is really equated to, again, W-2 income is also equated to equity and value in homes, which are the main 2 statistics, right? So when we talk about asset rich, cash poor, what we're not talking about is the amount of equity in businesses that has not necessarily been um, valued and is not always used as a part of that equation. And so one of the things from the
Mm,
chamber is focusing on what I call the middle market, because the middle market is the bridge between small business and large corporation. It is
yep.
wonderful to have an IPO and a company IPO in your backyard. It is wonderful to have a small business grow, right? But the bridge between those two is the middle market. Those middle market companies are your primes that help the small businesses be able to supply to those organizations,
Yeah.
right? But what happens when those middle market companies grow too big? There's nothing for them. I'm literally dealing with something right now where we have a member of our chamber which has grown exponentially. And because of their size and where they've gotten to, they do great work. They now cannot be classified as a small business, right? Which means now they can't participate. And if a small business needs a local prime to help them grow their company and connect, where are they going? So there's a huge, huge challenge there. And the other thing is, how do I help companies like that from the chamber perspective realize their value? And how do we quantify that value to investors to say, look, we have, 500 companies that are, have a enterprise value of whatever that number is. They have the sustainability and the capability to do the work. Now, can we look at a $50 million, $100 million investment into the county or into the business ecosystem because we can support it and sustain it?
So now, how are you helping traditional local enterprise navigate the AI divide to ensure they aren't left behind by rapid technology?
Yeah, that's a great question because I often think about that. Number one is starting with your own back in your own home, right? Is making sure the
Mhm.
chamber is ahead of it because it's one thing to advocate say, oh man, we gotta be AI ready, but we don't have anything related to AI in our own office, right? So I think
Mhm.
it's number one, making sure that we understand the need that we have to address for so that we can better serve our members. The other thing that I think is also connecting with companies like yourself, industry experts like yourself, to understand what's happening so that we're not in the dark. I'm not an AI specialist. I don't claim to be. I lean on experts like Thin Green to say, hey, we need your help, right? And then can
Mhm.
you help our businesses get up to speed on what that looks like? We have a number of stakeholder partners, and that's the one thing I do love about Prince George's County is there are a lot of organizations who are providing information. And what I try to do is position the chamber to not be the end all be all. But if
Right.
there are partners that are doing it, let's align. Collaboration is much better. You don't have to recreate the wheel. Let's support the effort. Let's bring our members to it. Let's put you in the forefront because we need the information. Data is the real currency, right?
Mhm.
So there are a number of conversations around AI. There's advocacy around AI that I think we have to continue to tackle. It is not a one and done conversation. We have to constantly be thinking about how the evolution of AI will support the business initiatives, and then we have to implement, right? There's only one way to really know is to put it into practice and to develop best practices around it. And then when the conversation around advocacy comes up, we are having these roundtable discussions and
Mhm.
conversations that help our legislators make better decisions.
Totally agree with that. So, from a leadership perspective, what is the most critical skill gap you're seeing in the workforce today, and how can business?
So I have two opinions about this.
Okay.
I think the most critical skill gap that we're facing is twofold. I think number one, we have to move away from linear skills, like a linear skill, like I'm one dimensional. I can only do this one thing. We have to move into, hey, I am skilled to do multiple things. Because when you think about why corporations have went offshore for talent, right? It's not just about call centers, right? They're not going to Asia to say, hey, we need 100 people in the call center. It's not just that. If you think about the talent in the workforce, they are multi-skilled at different things, and so I think that business model is now hitting American shores to where we have to be multi-skilled because of technology and AI, and companies are now saying, hey, we're going to really consolidate efforts into workflows. So I think our challenge is if I am a financial analyst and all I do is numbers, I also need to be thinking about project management. I
Right.
also need to be thinking about relationship management, right? If I am in technology the same way, I need to be thinking about the technical skill and the people skill simultaneously. I also need to be
Mhm.
thinking about how these two components can help me in an industry that I may not necessarily have experience in. One of the biggest areas that I think we didn't realize was more of a technical was in the tech. Let me say it this way: I think a blue collar field that was more of a tech enabled skill that we didn't necessarily package was auto mechanics. When cars became
Mhm.
smarter, your software engineer and your developer was right there. Because
Yeah.
think about all of the tools and diagnostic tools and things that they use to work on a smart vehicle, right? Where the windshield is the smartest piece of the tool on the automobile. It gives all the data, right? Collects all this data and redistributes it to the car. To replace a windshield right now is a very, very highly skilled platform that one, it has to be reprogrammed to just put a piece of glass on a car or
Mm,
plastic. Think about that, right? Think about diagnostics tools that were used 20, 30 years ago around cars as they were just becoming smart. And where
yeah.
we are now with cars that are electric and hybrid and all these different things, it's a highly skilled area. And so how does that translate into now technology today? Those are some examples that I'm talking about. So I think the challenge is number one, being multi-skilled and being adaptable to pivot and change, right? And
Hmm.
whatever a gig economy looks like around that. The other part that I think is a challenge is with the workforce, there's still the notion of kind of a pre-COVID model, right? I think COVID created a scenario, and I come from workforce, so I'm speaking on experiences and data that we collected of a choice of how people want to work, right? I think there's a
Yeah.
clash right now. And what it's going to create is you still have some of the workforce that feels like, hey, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do this. And you have employers who are like, well, I'm not going to negotiate what we need,
Right.
right? And so if you are approaching work from that scenario, which is again before COVID, kind of in COVID around a need to keep the workforce, what's happening now is they're just going to replace that with AI. And so unintentionally, we're pricing ourselves out of roles because of the unwillingness to adjust and adapt to what employers need. It
Yeah.
is no longer a workforce market, it's an employer's market now. And I don't think the workforce has realized that yet. And what happens is employers will now have to make quick decisions to keep bottom line going, to address, shareholder demand.
Hmm.
And what you will see is Oracle laying off 30,000 people.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with they don't want to sustain the workforce, but what they can't continue to do is negotiate between what I
Are you
will and will
coming
not
in?
do.
Yeah. Are you
They're
coming
not
in
going
or
to
are
do
you
it.
coming out? Yeah.
Yeah. They have to move the engine and they got to move quick. So if the
Hmm.
workforce is reluctant, they're going to get the short end of the stick. That's just the reality
Yeah.
at
Well,
every level.
yeah, I totally agree with that. Like what I commend IKEA, what they did was they utilized AI for their customer service,
Hmm.
right? But they saw that the customer service representative had that skill of they knew the catalog,
Hmm.
right? To be customer service. So what they did is they upskilled the customer representative and opened a division of basically having them be designers, which is
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is cool.
Yeah.
And they also like think it was in the millions that they made from that division alone. So
Wow.
it was a good pivot.
Yeah.
Instead of, just canning everybody, they're like, okay, well, let's upskill you. Let's make sure that you have the skill set to be designers and to help the consumers on what they really wanted. So you can go to
Definitely.
IKEA and be like, okay, well, I got this shelf here and I don't know what to do with it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's actually really cool because it taps into the creative side of your employee base that maybe
Hmm.
they didn't have an
No, they had,
opportunity to,
right. That
right?
they
And
didn't know they
so,
had, or they
yeah,
were like, "Oh, I didn't have the time to do this," or
yeah,
anything like that. So now creative side, like you said, is popping.
that's pretty cool actually. That's
Yeah.
actually really cool.
So in your role, how do you balance the need for regulatory oversight with the necessity of fostering a fail-fast innovation culture?
Great question. That is what I do every day. So chambers primarily are heavily focused on advocacy, right? And
Hmm.
advocacy is not just, hey, there's a bill, let's rush down to the Wayne Curry building or rush to Annapolis to the house and tell them don't do it, right? It really starts with building rapport and understanding, what our elected officials are really concerned about, what's on
Hmm.
their agenda. Also making sure that we're always keeping them in top of mind when anything new is happening because and I just recently had this conversation. There's an initiative that, an organization, an elected official just don't see eye to eye on. And both are right, right? Both have a perspective to enhance what's happening locally, right? But the way it's being presented and how it's being perceived creates an opposition. And so our job is to make sure, one, that we are protecting the interests of business, but also ensuring that that information makes it to our elected official, hearing their perspective and figuring out, okay, if we can't agree, how do we create a middle ground so that we can continue to grow and foster the right developments, right? In all levels. And so it is staying in front of your elected officials as much as possible, even if it's just, you see them in the hallway. How are your kids? Like, just, they're people, right?
Yeah.
It's not always law. But I think we have to do that. But we don't also have to share that information back to our members at all times, whether it's something we're directly related to our members or not. They got to know because the more you inform, the better you are. And then the other part is making sure that we are bringing everyone together in settings like our legislative wrap up coming up, right? Where we're
Mhm.
having these conversations. And it's not an attack on our elected officials, right? It's not you didn't do, and it's like, how do we get to the next level, right? We're not always going to agree, but we're always going to make sure that the number one goal is moving our local economy forward, right?
Right.
How do we do that? And it is going to be up to the small business to move things forward. I'll say small, medium-sized companies. That ecosystem is going to move education. It's going to move law and legislation. It's going to move almost everything. And that starts at the municipal level, right? Municipal level up. That if we can do that and do it in a way where it is informative, it is insightful, it has a little bit of influence, then you'll see a different change of how things are perceived and viewed from our elected officials. That's just my belief.
So how would the small mid-market businesses show up at those things? Like how can we make the change?
100%. So number one, join your chamber of commerce. It's like that's the first thing. Because we're in front of elected officials all the time.
Mhm.
I think get involved, not just join, but get involved. Join roundtable discussions, lead roundtable discussions. When we have opportunities to advocate for bills, we will send out a notice, excuse me, to our members and ask for feedback. If there are certain questions or things that you have, send it to us so that when we're in front of our council, when we're in front of our House delegation, we're bringing these points to the forefront. And the
Okay.
other thing that I would say too is always make sure that you're in front of your elected officials if you have the time. If you do not, and you have it within your budget, hire a lobbyist. If it's not your chamber, hire an independent lobbyist as well to be in the room when you're not in the room to advocate for your interests.
Okay.
It wasn't until I got into this role when I realized how important the government affairs community is to growing business because you're always planting seeds for the future. The harvest
Mhm.
is always down the road, right? It's not right now. But it's got to be continuing. And so large corporations who have the resources understand that, right? Small businesses may not have the resources, but your chamber is there all the time. And if I'm not in the room, we do have a contract lobbyist that is in the room all the time.
That's good to know. Now, reflecting on your tenure, what was the most difficult decision you had to make where the data was incomplete, but the stakes for the business community were absolute?
Say that one more time.
So, reflecting on your tenure,
Mhm.
what was the most difficult decision you had to make where the data was incomplete, but the stakes for the business community were absolute?
Oh, man, I feel like it's been plenty of times. So I'll give you one, or a couple actually. So when I first started, there was some already established mechanisms and thought processes around what a chamber is and what a chamber does. I think that challenging just that notion was probably difficult because it was the way has always been.
Mhm.
So everything from, and we just recently shared got something passed to our board where we have new dues revenue with a better deliverable package for members.
Okay.
And so part of it is determine, well, what type of chamber do we want to be? What county do we want to be? Like, how do we want to be identified? So I think that was one of the main challenges for me because traditionally chambers around the country are phasing out.
Mm.
And so it's reviving, okay, what does the chamber of the future look like? It's not going to be the way it has been in the past. We have to be very, very focused on programming. We have to be focused on deal flow. We have to be focused on just not capital from government entities, but we've got to be thinking about outside capital.
Mhm.
We've got to play kind of a quasi economic development role, not competing with our EDC, but we've got to be in rooms. And as a chamber president, I can't just be focused in Prince George's County because what I have to do is be able to bring outside resources back to the county. And
Mm.
I've also have to think about, okay, we need to be a minimum of 1,000 members strong. But here's another challenge. We can't just be a networking organization and have events, right? And so I'm kind of still in the middle of that to say the next chapter of the chamber is going to look totally different than what it's been for the past 2 decades. While all of that is great, but there's some things that for our sustainability of business, because there's a changing economic landscape, and we also have to be very realistic about the economic cliff that we're getting ready to face.
Hmm.
Your chamber is going to be the safe place for business. And if we don't have a network of institutional and private lenders from around the world that are ready to do business in Prince George's County, you can't rely on the government anymore. That is very clear. You cannot rely on preference programs at this point. That is very clear. So if you can't do that, then what can you rely on?
Right.
And that's the question, right? The other part is ensuring that our connectivity amongst identical regions are very clear. So when we think about our demographics, Maryland and Maine have kind of a similar topography and demographics around education and all these different things. Even healthcare, the systems kind of mirror each other. So what level of success are they having that we need to have and vice versa? But is there connectivity? Are we looking at companies in upstate New York that, I'll give you an example. Connecticut has a number of defense contractors who produce and manufacture for the military, have done it for a very long time. That demographic's aging out. So if we are AI driven with all of the defense agency heads here, NSA not too far up the road, Joint Base Andrews, Pentagon close by, right? FBI in DC, CIA out in Virginia, Quantico. Like we have military installations around.
Hmm.
They contract for different things. So we can make that a mechanism, right? Of, hey, we have a company here that has the ability and capability to produce the same product as the company in, say, Connecticut. Have we aligned the conversation around a potential acquisition or merger and relocation to Maryland? Is
Hmm.
there an incentive that we can offer for moving to Prince George's County? Is there dollars available that would match and support the financial transaction? Do we have workforce skill programs that can skill up this particular organization if you're bringing in 40, 50 jobs? Do we have workforce housing set aside? Do we have the education system that is prepared to produce the next wave of employees for this particular organization?
Hmm.
That's where the chamber can help to leverage and connect all of those dots that our stakeholders are actually doing. And we meet, all those things meet at the chamber.
Okay. There's a
So
lot
it's
of
it's
moving pieces.
it's a lot of moving pieces, but it's also when the chamber hasn't traditionally done that, it becomes a challenge because you have to be able to see the future
Yeah.
to know I have to be, and work backwards to the day to say, okay, I've got to make these steps to ensure that our businesses are in the best footing when things change.
Yeah. You need to see the forest for its trees, basically, is what you're
Yeah,
saying.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Now, with the growing integration of biotech in the region, how should CEOs be thinking about the intersection of data privacy and public health innovation?
I think it's a priority. One, the cybersecurity needs that we're facing right now. And I would say this too, paying attention to what's happening geopolitically. I don't know, we get a lot of information around some of the threats that could happen. We talk about sleeper cells, we talk about all these things of like yesteryear, right? This is a possibility. This is what could happen. Hopefully not, knock on wood, but we also have to talk about the cyber threats,
Hmm.
right? If this blackout happens, right? Think about all the data that gets lost.
Yep.
And
There's a lot of data.
a black doesn't have to be the whole city. A blackout could be your utility. One, you only need one,
Hmm.
right? It could just be, okay, look, we're not going to wipe out the Eastern Seaboard. We're just going to down your internet for 24 hours, which already happened. And look what happened when that, right? You can't get
Right.
logistics. You can't get, it doesn't take much.
No, not
So
anymore.
right, it doesn't. So an organization that mines data has to put this at the forefront around their security, but now also smaller companies that are supporting those large companies also have to think about their security. Because
Hmm.
if you're a supplier and you can't get access to what you need and you can't deliver what's required, that's going to cost you big
Yep.
time.
I totally
So
agree with that.
the opportunity risk there is much greater for small businesses because a large corporation can recover. They can go before Congress and ask for a bailout. A small business cannot.
Because that can bankrupt you, that can shut you down. You no longer have a business at that point.
That's right. That's right.
The third party risk is high now because of things like this.
100%. 100%.
So beyond physical real estate, what does infrastructure mean for a 21st century chamber of commerce?
Yeah. So infrastructure for me are a lot of different things. I mean, obviously transportation is a big one, but I
Uh-huh.
think infrastructure has a lot to do with the digitization, how we're transferring data, where it's coming from, how it's being mined. I'm big on data centers, as you know,
Uh-huh.
but I'm big on the data center conversation, not just about data centers per se and the revenue that it brings and how we're able to redistribute those dollars for community impact. But I'm thinking about all of the companies that support the data centers that follow the big fish, right? Your data center is your hook. That's your hook. That's your bait
Uh-huh.
to get the large corporations. And then what follows the large corporations are the amenities that we need, right? Or that we desire. So I always say this, and I say this to elected officials, I say it to all of the advocacy groups that have a want, but aren't really necessarily connecting the dots, right? We talk about the challenges of energy, the challenges of health, the challenges of all the different things where it's like, okay, well, if data centers are terrible, I'm just highlighting data centers because we talk about infrastructure. Then let's look at where we rank healthcare wise versus those places that have data centers. Are we at the top? If we're
Right.
not, you got to think about that. Let's look
Mhm.
at where we rank education wise. Let's look at where we rank in amenities, in transportation, and taxes. And so if we are fighting something like that to say, well, data centers are bad, and then the places that have data centers are above us in every category, you really got to look at that.
Yeah.
We have to really look at that. Now, the other part about infrastructure is where do large corporations want to be? That's the question we have to ask. They want to be close to their data.
Yep. The closer they
So
can be.
right? Where do white tablecloth restaurants want to be? They want to be close to the large corporations.
Mm-hmm.
Where does Whole Foods want to be? Whole Foods wants to be close to the white tablecloth restaurants that want to be close to the corporations that want to be close to their data. Do you see how this works?
Yeah. Yeah. I
Right?
see it. I see it.
So when we're saying no to one thing, we're saying no to a list of things down the road that we don't realize is self-inflicted.
I totally agree with you.
And so 10 years from now, here's something else that we have to think about. And I ring the alarm. That window of data center conversation is closing very quickly. SpaceX was supposed to do their IPO in the fall. They're now filing it now.
Mm.
Once SpaceX files their IPO and they begin to look at space as the next frontier for data centers, this conversation around land scarcity and where we build is over. It's over. So the companies or the states that have planted their seeds on it that are in development right now, it's a monopoly from that point on. There are no more opportunities. And
Yeah.
so we have to play this game well. And if we don't, it's not the big corporations that are the enemy or the government that's the enemy. We did it to ourselves.
Yeah. I totally agree.
You got to own it.
Yeah. I went to one of their rallies or one of the Q&As that they had for the data center at one of the malls, and it was interesting to see how many people were opposed to having the data center at that mall.
Yeah.
And for me, I was like, well, no, Six Flags has shut down. That's a
Mhm.
good piece of land that we can utilize
That's right.
for a data center because it will be one very far away from residents,
That's right.
right? Versus the one at the mall. And I was like, I put that in a suggestion. I'm like, Six Flags, new location, because that's one of the best location for the county itself right now, because well, personally, I don't know what's in the pipeline for that property, but I believe that would be a good location for a new data center. That's my opinion.
Yeah, no. So the challenge is how do if we're going to be the capital of quantum, University of Maryland has already begun just to open the door, right?
Mhm.
On new innovation, they're leading the way. But how do you have quantum and not have data? How do you have advocacy from elected officials around AI and then fight data? The two don't make sense, right? So I think part of what we have to think about is, again, what do we want to be known for as a county collective? What is the future of the work?
Mm.
Not just and that's something that I think we're starting to realize as a collective is the Prince George's County economy is a state economy, but is actually participating in the global economy. And we got to be thinking about what piece we are playing in a larger puzzle. It's a global economy we're in, not a state economy solely
Yeah.
or domestic. So whatever we do with the ports we have in Baltimore airport at BWI. You got to remember, that's a major logistics hub for commercial. We have a major logistics hub in Beltsville, Upper Marlboro, Brandywine, around distribution. We're in the global economy, whether we agree to it or not.
Mhm.
The next level of distribution is data. That's all it is. It's just distribution.
Mhm.
So if we're going to play in the transportation, we're going to play in the products and services, we might as well get in the data game, right?
Yeah.
And so how we manage that, I don't know, right? That's a collective, that's a little bit above my pay grade, but we can't ignore it. And the other thing that I have to think about is this conversation around energy is a national crisis, not a state crisis or a county crisis. So there's a bigger picture around why utility bills are high. And yes, we can say data centers in the grid, but it's also like a car, right? I equate it to a car. If you have a vehicle that doesn't have the proper tire pressure, doesn't have regular oil change, doesn't have a regular tune-up, you're going to burn more gas.
Yeah. And also the thing is, I think a large part of the population is not thinking that all of the infrastructure is old,
That part.
right?
That
So
part.
the if you were to think about the energy plants and stuff like that, they're old. So I don't know how old, but they're old, right?
Yeah.
So that's another thing, just like your analogy of the car. If it's an old car, it's not going to run as well.
Mm-mm.
So it's going to take more gas, right? So,
right.
and then imagine if it's an old car, you didn't do the tune up, you didn't put the best gas in there,
That's
the
right.
tire pressure is low, then it's not going to run as efficiently. It's going to
That's
take
right.
more gas. So then, yeah, of course, the energy bill is higher. The
Yeah.
gas price is higher because of that, right? When you put in you're using more gas
Mhm.
to run the same car.
And don't forget this, right? I had a friend of mine send me all of these statements on data centers of why they're bad, and they sent it to me digitally.
Hmm.
And I'm thinking, if they're bad, why are you sending me this digitally? You don't realize how they got here, right? Like, you sending me this using a data center. That's how it got here. So
Yeah.
yes, let's fight something, but also, are you willing to put your cell phone down? Are you willing to do away with that? So demand, the same thing about the car. I didn't do all the things I needed to do to maintain it, but I'm also driving it more.
Hmm.
I'm also the one putting the stress on it, right? So am I willing to cut that back? My own personal desires and needs around being attached to the cell phone and communicating and being am I willing to subdue that
Hmm.
for the same things I'm concerned about relative? And the answer likely is no.
Yeah, I totally agree. Because, the amount of data that we have on Netflix itself, right?
Mhm.
Are you
Yep.
willing to stop watching Netflix? Are you willing to stop streaming on YouTube?
That's right.
All of those, yeah, all of those platforms that we utilize nowadays versus 20 years ago, it wasn't there 20 years ago,
That's right. That's right.
right?
Yeah. Are you
So
willing to let it go?
are you willing to let it go? Is everybody saying, okay, bye bye Netflix,
That's
bye
right.
bye YouTube, bye bye podcasts?
That's right. That's
Are
right.
you willing to do it?
Yeah.
Then
No
if
more
you
text
are, well,
message.
yeah,
We go back to a rotary phone. We go back to that.
then your bill, your electricity bill would be lower.
Hmm.
Are you willing to part ways?
That's
When
right.
you give somebody something, it's hard to take it back. It's really
Amen.
hard.
Amen. Amen. Definitely.
Yeah. So now, what is the secret to a successful partnership between a private CEO and a public entity that doesn't end in gridlock?
So private-public partnerships are, I think, ideal because it takes some multiple factors, right? It takes private corporation, it takes public entity and investment. It takes, when I say private corporation, so let's use a larger Fortune 500 company who has some level of community impact or social impact initiatives in the local community. It takes government to also be able to manage and have some level of authority around that relationship. But also it takes smaller or mid-sized companies who can execute on those particular agreements and arrangements. So you'll see a lot of that in construction or
Mm.
development. Let's say large corporation A, money comes out of Wall Street, local government, A says, hey, we have this project that we have created incentives and all types of um, TIFs for, tax incentives for. We've zoned the land. It's ready to go. And then you'll have to have a fiduciary. So a CDFI, a Community Development Financial Institution, who will then administer the funds. So Corporation A will will put the money into the CDFI. CDFI will then say, we will distribute these funds to smaller mid-sized company A that will produce the project. Then smaller mid-sized company A becomes the prime, and then they start hiring a lot of smaller companies to then help them finish the project. So it takes all of those things to make a partnership work between public and private entities.
Wow. I did not know that. Well, good to know.
I can tell you there are a lot of corporations who are very, very focused on making those happen. I can tell you where the challenges are and the opportunities are for Prince George's County, particularly are the number of resources around minority and underserved leaders who have capacity in other regions who don't have enough minority and underserved leaders or business leaders who have capacity in their regions. So the benefit of Prince George's County is that we have a surplus of it. Remember I told you earlier in our conversation, we have a number of private, small, medium-sized companies who have the capability and doing
Mm-hmm.
extremely well, but they're not connected to other parts of the regions of the country that need that type of business because they can't find enough in their part. So if we can create that connectivity, you have Prince George's County businesses that are now doing business in Michigan, Texas, New York, North Carolina, like all over the country, but they're based here.
Mm-hmm.
Now that gives them a capacity for expansion. It also gives you an opportunity to now operate at a higher level, but then now you can bring other companies with you so that they can grow.
Yeah.
And so that is not that also creates barriers because if you have capacity and you grow to that level, then when you talk about preference programs, now you don't qualify to be in those preference programs because
You
so
got too
that's
big.
the challenge, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're constantly faced with that.
Now, how are you encouraging small to mid-sized members to prioritize cybersecurity as a strategic asset rather than a back office expense?
Yeah. So I can give you real life example. We have a new platform that we're introducing, taking a handful of businesses, about 10 businesses, through this year-long cohort. And beta testing it right now, where we're talking about enterprise value, right? The goal is to grow enterprise value. And in growing the enterprise value, there are 4 capitals that we focus on. Human capital is one, structural capital is the second, social capital is the third, and customer capital is the fourth.
Okay.
And so structural capital is part of how you grow enterprise value. And so one of the misconceptions that I try to educate our medium-sized companies on is enterprise value is not directly related to more revenue. So you
Okay.
can't make more revenue and try to say, okay, well, I've increased my bottom line or I've increased my top line revenue, so now that should fix all my issues. It doesn't. It actually doesn't at all. By minimizing your risk, and you tie that into, especially now, cybersecurity risk, that's part of one of the components of risk minimization. Risk minimization is what increases your ability to have more value. And essentially, that value creates more equity, and that equity is something that banks are very attracted to. So if
Mm.
you are able to minimize your risk and you're able to show that in your systems and structures, you also can combine that with the right people can help you grow the social aspect, right? What the brand is saying, customers, who you're selling to, whether it's a diverse mix or different types of customers, that then equates to a best in class value. That best in class value has a higher multiple. So if our company do 10 million and let's say my EBITDA is 1 million, that's a 10% EBITDA, right? And if I can increase those 4 components and I can go from 10% to say, 3 million, now I'm at 30%,
Mm.
right? I'm much more um, align with the banking practices and their lending practices at that level. And they would rather give out larger money than small money because they don't make a return. So I think incorporating that into, hey, by doing this, you're minimizing your risk, but your minimization of risk increases your X component. Now I'm seeing it differently,
Mm-hmm.
right? We
Yeah.
have to now do everything to minimize risk because the largest corporations, the ones who go IPO, when you think about why they're so transparent, it's because it minimizes risk. That's why
Yep.
everything is public. It minimizes your risk.
Yeah. It makes sense because most small mid-sized companies are believe that they're not at risk, right? So from an attack, it's like, oh, I'm too small for to be. They're not worried about me. They're more worried about, you know, Targets and Walmart,
Hmm.
the big companies
That's right.
versus the 200 employee company that is a government contractor.
That's right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's one of the things I keep on saying. You have a bank account, you're at risk,
That's right.
regardless.
Absolutely.
As an
Absolutely.
individual, as a company, you are at risk if you have a bank account because they do not care about what you do or who you are, company size, or you're male, female. They really don't care. They just want your money
Yeah.
or your data.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Your
Absolutely.
or do you want your data to get money,
How
right?
about
So
that?
at the end of the
How
day,
about that?
it's about the money, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
regardless if it's direct data to get whatever information that they're looking for to sell to the black market or to sell to the competitors to do something with it, it ends up in money.
Hmm. That's right. That's right.
Now, if you were to look at the regional GDP in 2031, what
Hmm.
role will AI play in the most successful companies under your purview?
Well, I would say it's probably going to be the most dominant role. If I go back and see, if I went back 100 years to say, where were we in 1931? We were 2 years into the Great Depression. History sometimes repeats itself. Most times it repeats itself. And you think about the conversations we're having around the economy right now in 2026. I do think there's going to be some economic correction in 2027, 2028. The question is in 2029, what is the path to recovery? And then those companies that and as AI is becoming more and more it's becoming smarter and more advanced, and companies are now starting to maneuver into a more focused component around certain job classifications. The question is, the companies in 2031 that are not necessarily um, adaptive of AI will be in trouble. Actually, I only think it'll be 2031. I think it'll be in the next 2 years. If you're not, AI is not at least 20 to 30% of your operation, it's going to be tough to keep up.
Hmm.
I think there's going to be more consolidation, but I think the new economy that emerges from there will be a hybrid of AI and workforce, where I think we'll be living in the Jetsons era, which is timely because that movie's coming out. I don't know, maybe that's a message, but I think you have to get used to robotics. I think you have to, as a part of a normal way of life, just like the pen, right? Just like the cell phone. Yeah, remember
Hmm.
the same conversation we're having right now around data centers we had around smartphones 20 years
Hmm.
ago. They're
Yep.
dangerous. They create radiation and the ear's gonna fall off. Okay.
We're okay.
Yeah, it's the same thing with robotics, right? It will
Hmm.
become a normal way of life. AI communication will be a normal way of life. I think the Minority Report, that movie that Tom Cruise had,
Hmm.
is gonna be very real.
Hmm.
And so when we talk about information sharing and um, the ability to have access to your information at a moment's notice from anywhere has already happened. I think it will be more accepted in 2031
Yeah.
because of how the new digital currencies will shape communication. I think part of the challenge is going to be if you are resistant. Um, I don't know how you will focus in the new economy. If you have something to hide, I don't know how you will focus in the new economy unless you have resources to hide it, right? But most of us don't really have that much going on where we got to hide stuff. I mean, honestly, like the movies, but I'm
What
not
are we
Fast and
hiding?
Furious, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, what exactly are we hiding? Exactly,
Yeah. Exactly.
like so. I don't know. I think it's going to be interesting to see, but I think we'll be. I think if Prince George's County, I think will be if we play it right, will be a very generic version of what Wakanda, the image of Wakanda was on in the movie screen when they did the city, and there was a real depiction of a hybrid living of grid modern city at the same time. Right? You
Okay.
had flying cars, robots, and you had people walking around.
At
Just
the
very
market.
basic, like it, but I don't know if people caught it. I was like, "You look at the city; it's a mix of the future and the past, all at the same time."
Now I have to go back and watch it.
You gotta look at when they did a panoramic view of the city, and it was just people just walking around. It was literally the combination of the future and the past.
Yeah. Well, I'll have to check it out because I don't remember that part.
Yeah,
So is it the first one or the second one?
the first one. Go
The
to the
first one.
first one tells a whole lot. I'm like, man, like,
It went deep.
yes, right? They're talking about electromagnetics. This is so much in it that it's just like, okay, well, where are we headed? Right?
Yeah.
Everything is very simplistic, but yet modern and advanced at the same time.
So let's see. Now, I have two more questions. A high level advocacy is a marathon of negotiation. What is your non negotiable morning routine that keeps your mind sharp for these high stakes discussions?
Absolutely. Number one, the first thing I listen to is positive affirmations every day.
Uh-huh.
Non-negotiable. Have to do it before I cut on the news, before I look at anything on my phone. I cut my app on, and it's positive affirmations every day.
Nice.
The next one, if depends on the weather, but I try to work out, whether it's walking, working out, calisthenics. I try to do that before I do anything else.
Okay. So those are your two non negotiables.
Definitely,
Good.
definitely.
So now, when you eventually move on to your next chapter, what is the one specific change in the local business landscape that you want to be able to point and say that happened because we took a stand?
I think we created more business owners and entrepreneurs who became employers and contributed to the local economy. And we've increased the commercial tax base from 27 to 40%
Nice.
in the next. And we can do it. And that's the thing. We don't have to, it doesn't take 10 years. We can do it in the next 3 to 5 years through acquisition, through transitioning professionals or businesses who want to scale and creating this pipeline of hyper growth.
Hmm.
That is a mission. Our ETA program that we just launched, Entrepreneurship Through Acquisition, is in the second iteration. We just launched a new class, but the goal is to create a good number of employers through entrepreneurship,
Well,
myself being one of them.
Alex, I thank you so much for your time today. It was a great conversation. I hope to do this again, and I will
Absolutely.
see you soon.
Yes, you will.
And
Thank you again for everything you do.
yeah, of course. And thank you to the Wise crew for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.
Awesome.
Bye.